We need to talk about what's next for recently fired Carolina Panthers head coach Matt Rhule. And nobody feels sorry for Matt Rhule right now. His contractual buyout is over $40 million, despite an absolutely putrid record of 11 and 27, wasting an awesome defense in 2021 due to a bottom three offense, making three different quarterbacks look absolutely washed. And the biggest crime is emptying Bank of America Stadium without any trace of Panthers fans over the last 2 weeks. And now he's somehow the hottest name in college football coaching market for next season. And yes, Matt Rhule, he turned around Temple. He brought Baylor back to life. And it was those efforts that made Carolina Panthers owner David Tepper personally recruit him to the Carolina Panthers like he was the LeBron James of coaches. And maybe that goes to show that David Tepper didn't truly understand the nature and the history of his own team. Matt Rhule is a proven commodity as a rebuilder. The Carolina Panthers, they didn't need a rebuild though. The Panthers have historically bounced back. They've been a bounce back franchise. Despite two Super Bowl runs over the last 20 years and two other NFC championship appearances in the franchise's short history, the Panthers have never had back to back winning seasons, not even in the run of making the playoffs four times in 5 years under Ron Rivera. But what have the Carolina Panthers traditionally always had? Stability at quarterback. Whether it was Kerry Collins, Steve Berline, Jake Delhomme, or Cam Newton for 90% of the franchise's history, they've had the right piece under center that allowed them to tinker everywhere else until the team was capable of making a playoff run. Now, the Panthers' worst years have always come when it was obvious that they didn't have somebody who should be an NFL quarterback under center. And in fact, you can thank Chris Winkie in 2001 for going 1 and 14 for the Carolina Panthers ending up with Julius Peppers. And you can thank a combination of Jimmy Clausen and Matt Moore for going 1 and 14 in 2010 for the Panthers to end up with Cam Newton. Now, Matt Rhule didn't walk into a situation where the Carolina Panthers where they needed a complete overhaul. They just needed a competent quarterback to take over what was a washed at that point in time Cam Newton. And even if you did need a complete overhaul, they never went in that direction anyway. And instead of looking for a quarterback to chase in the draft, big name free agent to trade for, they kept, instead of starting from scratch, they went in the scratch and dent bin consistently, reclamation projects, cast offs, and they still, throughout that whole time, same primary running back, same primary wide receiver as they did when Matt Rhule took over. Guys, that Matt Rhule inherited on defense were like Dante Jackson, Shaq Thompson, Brian Burns, and they're still all at the heart of what the Panthers currently do defensively. He didn't even make a symbolic change at long snapper. Like barely anything is done to overhaul this roster. A lot of people are going to ignore his time in Carolina and only look at his collegiate experience. But I think Matt Rhule's time in Carolina is exactly why he's a higher risk than most other pundits think. People are quick to point at Steve Spurrier, Nick Saban, or Chip Kelly's time in the NFL as a reason that pro experience need not to be taken into account. But people forget that those three, while they might not have been a perfect fit in the NFL, looked competent in a way that Matt Rhule hasn't in the NFL. But let's say everybody is right, and a trip back to college football will show the world why an NFL team was willing to drop $70 million on Matt Rhule in the first place. Well, where does he best fit? We don't know if Matt Rhule is capable of sustained success. He left Temple, left Baylor, and it seems that we do know that Matt Rhule may not be the best coach for a team that is just one or two pieces away from being competitive. The only thing that we do know is that Matt Rhule can create something from nothing, which college football programs will actually give him nothing to work with. Well, there are two options in the Pac 12 that are potentially future members of a conference where he's already coached before, the Big 12. And they might offer him the blank slate that he needs to work his magic. Arizona State has about 70 players on scholarship, and 10 of those are probably former walk ons, and another 6 to 7 quarterbacks that don't play. And beyond that, they're facing sanctions from the time under Herm Edwards and rumors that someone on staff was leaking information to quicken Herm's firing. And in order to take the job, any head coach, Matt Rhule or anybody else, is going to get rid of everybody, the stadium window washers, the cooks, the video people, everybody, the way that they have trust in the building over there at Arizona State. Well, what about Colorado? They're in the opposite boat. Too many kids on scholarship, but under NCAA rules, a new head coach can get in there and start chopping away the roster. And Colorado's best years, though, they came from recruiting connections established in Texas. And Matt Rhule did that over 2.5 years ago when he was still at Baylor in order to resurrect Baylor. Now, Colorado doesn't or isn't willing to have the same financial considerations that you need to typically attract a top level coach. But Matt Rhule is sitting on more unearned cash right now than a January 2021 GameStop investor. So that shouldn't be an issue. Now, some people might say that Nebraska needs a rebuild. But if I'm Matt Rhule, I'm looking at Lincoln, Nebraska, like it's the Charlotte of the Plains. Nebraska seems to have plenty of talent. And unless you attract a quarterback that's either transcendent as a runner or a passer, you're going to fall into the same trap that Mike Riley, Scott Frost did. And the one thing that Nebraska fans can't afford Matt Rhule in a way that Arizona State or Colorado can is lowered expectations. And if the Huskers aren't on the verge of 10 wins by 2024, then we're going to be right back here talking about the next reclamation project for Matt Rhule. But he won't have, at that point in time, the same shine as he has right now. And instead of Tempe or Boulder, we might be talking about Troy, Alabama, or Reno, Nevada. Let that sink in.